everybody, I hope you're all doing well. So today we are finally going to move on to actually stitching this bottom bit of the leaf, and I'm slightly scared because we've got wedge stitches but it's going to go well. So I've watched Philippa's video which we showed just on Tuesday, and I'm just reading the instructions again because I want to make sure that I get it right. So we're going to start by putting in the centre stitch, and I'm just going to follow Philippa's guide on linen. So coming up here and then down here, and we've got this in a double thread, that's from following the stitch chart. Then I'm putting a wedge stitch in, which is 3/4, and then just going to put that in there, and that's to help get the angle, which I think I have there. And then we're going to put a 3/4 one in, which is coming immediately below the wedge. So we've done the wedge stitch, and then it says next add a 3/4 length stitch by coming up immediately below and right next to the long stitch. So if I follow Georgie's drawings on here, that means we'll come up to here, like that. Oh yeah, and you can see that it's got the different angle. Oh, that's clever. Then I'm going to come back down here. So then it's a long stitch, a half stitch, and a 3/4 stitch. And here the angle changes again, so that will be a wedge stitch. There's the long stitch, and then we'll put the half stitch. I think my thread's a bit too long. And then a 3/4 stitch. Now that doesn't look quite right, so I'll just unpick that. Try and get it tighter into it, just because it looked like it was making it quite bulky on the side. So if I put that in, that looks slightly better. So I've got the long stitch here, which then means to do a wedge stitch. I'll just check. Oh, that's the next bit. The next bit's stitch, which comes 3/4 stitch. So then we'll go long stitch again. Half stitch. And 3/4 stitch. Move on to the second colour. I'll do it slightly longer maybe than that because it's getting folded. No, it's not. This is a single thread. So I need to change my needle as well. So good job I double checked that then. So we'll cut it there. I'll just change over my needles from the silver back to the gold. and we're going to go on to the next colour, where from the looks of the drawings in the instructions, we're going to be using that wedge stitch quite a bit more. So I'm just going to recap again on the wedge stitch because I know that I need that remembering. So it's cover the outer edge of the outward areas of the curved leaf by adding a wedge stitch. Always begin with a long stitch and follow this with the wedge stitch. Next, add a 3/4 length stitch by coming up immediately below the wedge, right next to the long stitch. So long stitch, half stitch, 3/4 stitch. Then continue as usual in long and then 3/4 stitches. I repeat, the name of the stitch is long and short stitch, but really the stitches you should make, except for the wedge stitch, should be long and 3/4 stitch. So we're doing long, 3/4, long, 3/4. We can do that. So, it'll be figure 7, which is what we're needing right now to do my seeding stitch. I'll try and do this one two-handed stitching. I find when I'm concentrating, I find it a lot harder. Right, so we're going to start on the second colour now, and I'm slightly confused that I'm worried that I'm going to do it wrong because I'm confused as to, I know we're using the wedge stitch to help get the curve, and when I've looked further on, I think we do the bulk of this curve last in the 158, the darkest colour, and that's what we do last. And Philippa has put in the instructions, when working the stitch onto the curved leaves, lay the longer stitches of the second colour, so that's the colour we're going on to, so that the angle of the thread changes gradually from the previous layer, positioning the wool over the first layer of colour and holding it with your free hand before committing to stitching down. So, right, we'll just start, and if it goes wrong we can always somehow try and rectify it, unpick it, go over it. So, I'm coming up in the middle, and I'm going to do my first long stitch to, I think, to here. So we're getting that gradual, that's a gradual movement. So then I'm going to put a wedge stitch in to kind of help with that, which would go like that. Philippa always says to go, I spoke to her the other day and she said always make sure that when you're doing long and short stitch, satin stitch type stitches, start from the middle, which I think I have been doing, but I wanted to pass that piece of information on because I thought it's always a good one to know. So we're going to come up and I'm going to come down under this stitch like that. So, I'm getting confused as to which stitch on. So, if we go, call that a long stitch. Then we'll do 3/4 stitch. Then I need to make sure that I'm coming up through the first colour because that's how you get the nice gradual. I just realised that I've been doing it one-handed stitching too. here. It looks like these are quite straight, just to fill this bit in. Side done. I think it looks alright. I'm not 100% sure I know how I've done it or if it's right, but I'm quite happy with how that looks. So I'm happy with how this side's looking. So I'm going to get a new bit of thread just because I ran out on that side, and we will try and get the other side to match that curve. So I'm just going to finish off that stitch and go some more. These are still quite straight down to here. Following the instructions on here, there's also stitches like that here. So I'm just going to put these in. That's the first two colours and that kind of bobble of the leaf done. So tomorrow we'll move on to doing the next bobbles as we move that angle around, and then the final bit we do, which hopefully I'll be able to do tomorrow with you, is this final bit, which is in the darkest kind of bluey green colour. So that will finish it off really nicely, which is why there's this space I've kind of left here. I've kind of gauged it off the instructions, of the hand draw instructions, and off the picture on the box to kind of help me gauge that a little bit. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out. I was a bit worried about starting it, just because it's a bit, you know, when it's something you know but you don't know, it can get a bit intimidating, but sometimes you've just got to get started, and I'm happy with how that has turned out. If you can see any glaring errors, please do let me know in the comments below. I really appreciate the comments you've all been leaving, so they definitely help me. So any advice on this I would greatly appreciate. But I will see you tomorrow when we move on to some more of this leaf.